Hello and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Jordan.
And I'm Elliot.
Before we get started, I would like to remind our listeners that you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. Episodes are available on most podcatchers, and episodes are also available on YouTube at the channel Alien Familiar Media. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com, and we are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to be doing another review episode. This is not going to be a full review. We're going to be talking about the Misty Isles adventure /setting/campaign. We have been going through it for a while now, and because it is the Misty Isles, there are quite a few islands in the archipelago, and we are in the process of going through those at the time of recording. And as we are going through them, we are starting to realize that the islands that we have been to have, at least at the very beginning, have started to kind of bleed together a good bit. So we're going to be breaking the review of the Misty Isles up into at least 2 parts, possibly 3, maybe more, depending on how everything goes. But we'll just have to see. Today, we're just going to be talking about a few of the islands that we have been to. And Jordan, you're one running this. Is there any sort of actual order to which we have been to these, or has it just been kind of a roll of the dice as to which island we've been to? I think the first island we intentionally went toward was Baylor, but that wasn't the first island that we actually arrived at.
Yeah. So just to place this in the world that we're running, I'm running a Greyhawk campaign, and we're trying to play this historically through real world publication dates of a lot of these old adventures. I decided to drop the Misty Isles into the icy sea in the north of the continent of Oirik on Orth on Greyhawk, because it just seemed to fit in well, and there wasn't any content there from official Greyhawk stuff. So we've got this archipelago of 9 islands, and the group started off in Blackmore, firmly in the north of the Flanace in Greyhawk. And there we bounced through a few early adventures. I placed Poortown from the Tower of Xenopus there on the coast, and they followed the pirates that are featured in the Tower of Xenopus northeasterly into the island chain of the Misty Isles. It seemed to dovetail really well because there's a lot of pirates and sea raiders and stuff like that connecting the two adventures. So that's where we're at. And the first island that they set sail for was the Isle of Baylor, which happens to be the location of the Palace of the Vampire Queen, which is the first standalone published adventure for Dungeons and Dragons, also published by We Warriors, obviously, along with the Misty Isles. So Palace of the Vampire Queen is set in the mountains of the Isle of Baylor, and the Isle of Baylor is sort of the capital of the archipelago of the Misty Isles. And Palace of the Vampire Queen got published in 1976, like June of 76. I couldn't find a month for when Misty Isles was published, but it was 1977, so it was an elaboration on some of the locations and characters that were just briefly mentioned in the intro to Palace of the Vampire Queen. So yeah, that's how the group got to here.
And as of recording this, our characters first entered into the area of the Misty Isles around the beginning of February of this year. And except for about a 2.5-month stint where we did the Palace of the Vampire Queen, we have been doing that so far up until the end of July as we record this. So we've got probably a good 3.5-4 months of just doing this content so far. And our game is entirely remote. We play for 4 hours every Monday, pretty much without interruption. We've had maybe we've definitely had one, maybe a second week where we didn't actually play. I don't remember.
Yeah, we got most of them. Probably 2 sessions out of that time period we missed, I think.
Yeah, so we've been going at this for a while, and that's part of why some of our recollections of what we've done, particularly in that very first month of February, is probably a little bit hazy. And as I was going back through my notes to read my character's journal, there's a lot of information that I had forgotten that had even happened.
Yeah, and just to put this in a little bit of a historical context here, this publication, this is arguably the first campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons that saw publication to the public. There was obviously the Blackmore campaign that Dave Arneson had been running. Gary Gygax had his Greyhawk campaign, and Len Lakofka and several other folks in that early scene kind of had their worlds or pieces of the world that they were developing. But this is the first one that I'm aware of that shows up like this. Arguably, depending on when the dates fall, like a lot of these things were going right in parallel. The wilderness, the Wilderlands of High Fantasy, City-State of the Invincible Overlord world, the Judges Guild content was coming out in like 76. So that's the same year as Palace of the Vampire Queen, but later. And, each of these companies are dropping supplements that are elaborating on their world in different ways. But, City-State of the Invincible Overlord was just a metropolis. There wasn't like much outlined in the surrounding world, much less, like multiple continents. Even the countryside wasn't really well laid out. But as far as I know, the Misty Isles is the first instance that we have of a large regional map with a bunch of different cities and different islands and land masses and stuff like that, all connected together with intrigue and plot hooks and so on and so forth. So for that, it's an interesting artifact of D&D history, I think.
Yeah, and the structure of this is you mentioned that there's a big map of the overall area, and then each individual island has their own maps. Are there additional maps of like smaller areas within each island, or is it just the main map of the region and then the map of each island?
So that's actually a problem with this module. There is no map of the overall island chain. There is no archipelago level map. All you get in this book is a map, a one-page map that's a hex map of each individual island. But you have no idea how those islands are placed, oriented relative to each other, or what the distances are between them. So when I was putting this together, I was working off of a PDF that I took some screenshots of, and then put those into the GIMP software, and just manually created a map of the island chain based on reading through every single description of every single hex of every single island and noting where it mentioned stuff from other islands. If, on the north coast of one island, there's a hex that mentions that there's some seafarers there from this other island, then I make the assumption that other island that they're from must be to the north of that island. And so through this reading and careful note-taking and line drawing, and then just kind of like, the artistic license that you'd have to take in something this vague, I got what I think is a pretty reasonable assumption of the shape of the archipelago. But yeah, I really don't understand how somebody missed out on making an overall map of the entire island chain. But it kind of goes along with the Wee Warriors design decisions in other product, where they were big fans of these like modular things where, you could shuffle up levels of a dungeon and have a bunch of different paths through stuff. And they marketed these things as dungeon mastering kits, not adventures. And so there was some sort of like, kind of arts and crafts copy paste sort of assumptions being made here about how this would be used. But there are no zoomed in maps of cities or, particular hexes or anything. You basically get one point of interest, if that, per hex, and the rest is kind of up to you to improvise.
So, Jordan, would you mind sending me your constructed region map, and then I'll host it on the website, and that way it can be a resource for anyone else who wants to, doesn't want to have to go through line by line and kind of do all that mental math that you've already done?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing worth mentioning is that, this is a very old module. The only reprint that I could find was from Pacesetter Games in 2013. And when they published it, they did a pretty good job, but they made a few changes that made it kind of difficult to work with for historical purposes. And that is that they converted everything to this D6 based system that they were using. So all the monster stats are kind of messed up. And they also took the liberty of adding a 10th island that obviously doesn't really have much to do with any of the historical stuff. I didn't realize this until after I'd already made the archipelago map. So there's this place in the north called the Isle of Serpents that was completely a contrivance of Pacesetter as far as I'm aware, unless they were taking something from some Wii Warriors thing that has slipped under my radar and elaborated on it. As far as I know, they completely made up that island, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Like I said, this is archaeology.
Well, if we discover that information later, we'll be sure to include it.
So how was the reprint?
What's that?
So I'm just curious, the reprint where they converted to a different system, what timeline did they do that in? Like, how long ago?
That was in 2013 that Pacesetter Games made that reprint. They added some art that is very much art of the 2013 era of role-playing games. They definitely did some editing and, straightening up the trade dress and stuff like that. Now a company called Precis Media has the rights to these modules. So if you're looking for it, look there.
Fascinating. So how are we going to jump in on this, guys? Are we looking for opinions at this moment, or how do you guys want to attack this?
I kind of want to go through the islands that we've, like in the order that we've been to, and talk about our experiences with them. Jordan was kind enough to post the order in which we'd been to the islands so far, although I think only a couple of the islands we've been to, we have thoroughly explored at this point.
Which one do you think that is? You think of the Triffids?
Yeah, that definitely that island. I feel like we got everything we needed out of that island, and I don't think that we are ever voluntarily going back to that island.
Never say never.
Why are your character wanting to go back?
Oh no, I could just see a world in which we end up having to go back. Who knows?
Yeah, that's why I qualified willingly.
So should we do a summary of that one since we're already kind of talking about it?
Let's start with the Isle of Priests, since that's the first one we went to, although we didn't really do a whole lot there. We just kind of noticed that there was some orcs on the island and did a little bit of investigating, but not really a whole lot.
By the way, let me just jump in here real quick just to correct something that I said. I misremembered the version that I am using, that is the updated version, is Precis Intermedia, and that was published in 2021, and they use their Swords and Six-Siders system for that version of the game. It's largely the same, except for where mechanics come in, and then there's a little bit of content that they've dropped in at the beginning with some new monsters, some seafaring movement rules, and things like that for adventuring around. That's one thing that was missing from the original, is that you don't have a scale for anything. All they say is that like a land hex is an hour of walking, and a water hex is a half an hour of sailing. It's not very useful. And, there's nothing there for how to handle seafaring from a mechanical perspective or anything like that. So, Priestess Intermedia, if anybody wants to go see what the current version of this looks like out in the world.
Cool. The only thing that I really remember from the first island we went to, the Isle of Priests, is that's where we very first encountered the overarching threat that the orcs are posing to all of the islands in the archipelago. That's kind of our first taste of something that is going on that is larger than just one island, and that seems to be a theme that's been going on throughout this entire campaign. Is that there are things going on each island, but then there are overarching things that are going on in the entire region.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think is interesting about this module this adventure setting being so early, is that I was expecting a complete grab bag of just random encounters, but when you sit and plot it out, there is elaborate connections between islands, and you really get into like some crazy conspiracy board sort of stuff if you try to really line it all up and figure out who's got interests in what and who's doing backroom dealings with who. And it's deep. It's much deeper than it looks on the surface, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about the more political aspect of this once we get to talking about Baylor Island, because that's where we first started learning that there were a lot of interests at play, and there weren't. For instance, the orcs are definitely bad guys over the entire archipelago. It's very historically accurate, I would say, that although there are quote bad guys, there are bad guys in people's minds. There really aren't definite bad guys as far as motivations. Like, there are a lot of different groups at play, and all of them are playing against each other in one form or another. So it can be like, for a campaign that came out as early as it is, there's a lot of nuance here that can be played up.
Oh yeah, a lot of moral gray areas, and a lot of situations where you have to deal with like really objectively shitty people in order to hopefully wind up with a good result. Like, morally speaking, it's not at all as cut and dry as one might expect from something so early.
So our first island was the Isle of Priests. We've literally just kind of pass it by as we were on our way to Baylor, and we saw that there was evidence that there was some raiding going on there. So we decided to stop off and try to make a difference in what was going on there. We tried to, let's see if I remember this correctly, we tried to track a war band of orcs that were pillaging the countryside, and we really didn't have a whole lot of interaction with a bunch of NPCs until we got quite a ways into, until we had followed the orcs for a while and found some people who had managed to either avoid the orcs or the orcs themselves didn't attack.
That was the Oracle, as I recall. You guys found the orc warband heading to the ocean, and then found a cabin that they were kind of passing, and went and talked to an oracle, who then gave each of you a prophecy or prediction, whatever, relevant to you. And then you found out that those orcs, in fact, were there to protect the prophet and the oracle, and that they were defectors from Mortock's armies. After that, you guys went to the nearby city of Canfold, which was completely run by these weird monks that were basically holding together a war-torn rubble of a city, just trying to keep some semblance of civilization, though everyone was sort of on the verge of starvation.
I'm almost certain I missed that session. I have no recollection of any of this.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty certain, because I never got my fortune read.
Oh, wait, you declined. I recall. I asked everyone, and you declined.
That is okay, that's the case.
But anyway, you guys really didn't do much there in the city. You found out a little bit about how the orcs had swept through a year prior, and it pretty much devastated and overwhelmed all of the dwarven defenses. If you try to kind of roll back the clock to prior to the orc invasion, it looks to me like you've got maybe up to five decently settled dwarf islands. The rest are questionable as either total wilderness or weird magical wasteland kind of stuff. But this looks to me like it was one of the better islands. But anyway, you guys really only wound up here due to a failure at a navigational roll on the dice when you were learning to do seafaring. And so, yeah, you hung out with some priests. You got some healing, I think. Tried to help a few people out, but then you pretty much just boogied on. So I would say you barely touched the Isle of Priests, to be completely fair, because this island has a lot going on with different religious organizations and some strange sort of I don't know if it's holy war, but definitely some diametrically opposed theological tensions going on.
Yeah, we spent 2 partial sessions there on the island. We arrived in the middle of one session, and then by the middle of the next session, we were already ready to move on, because at that point in the campaign, we were really itching to get to Baylor Island. It had been promised to be one of those places where we could get and have refuge and basically level up. And I know my character was really itching to have some downtime, and that was my main focus in the campaign at that point.
Oh, for sure. I remember I had so much money just burning a hole through my pocket. That's why I was probably the guy yeah, guys, this is great. Let's get off this island so we can go spend some money.
Yeah, and I was like, let me get off this island so I can learn these sick new spells that I just picked up.
So on to Baylor Island?
It was on to Baylor Island after that. You guys had some ocean encounters and with a sea monster and some other stuff, and just sort of limped your way into Baylor to find a village that had been completely sacked, burned, and everyone killed.
I want to just speak about just the sea monsters that we've encountered so far. These things are no joke. Our characters were level 4 and 5 at this point, and I definitely felt wholly in danger every time we encountered a sea monster. And since we have done that, and since we're talking about this, I looked at some of the stats of some of the monsters, and yeah, I was very wise to be afraid of these things, because they will kill a relatively high level character pretty quickly.
You're looking at monster stats, you fucking cheater? I should bust you a level.
Hey, I had to look up the stats of that plesiosaur that we saw at Trifid on the Isle of Trifid.
You had to?
Whenever you posted the information that you just did right before this session, I was reading over the random encounter rolls, and it says how much damage it does and how many hit points it does. I was researching for this episode when I stumbled across those stats.
Okay. Well,
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Looks like I'm going to have to start shaking up some of the listed monster stats then.
Teacher Jordan's angry. You're going to the principal's office, Clayton.
You should read what Gary Gygax says about shit like this in the first edition DMG. He's pretty much recommending something like drawing and quartering for players that pull shit like that.
He was kind of a maniac, though. Let's be real.
I think he was joking. So the Isle of Baylor, yeah, this is supposed to be the safest island in the most built up. But really it's only got three cities and one little village that it talks about. The one village, like I said, is already kind of destroyed. And yeah, dead bodies of Silentian monks, which are the same order as the Isle of Priests that you guys had encountered before. But you've got 3 other cities. You've got the capital city, Arto, which is kind of in the mountains and central to the island. And from there is where the Palace of the Vampire Queen adventure jumps off. You go up into the mountains to go to the Vampire Queen's palace. You've got the city of Moor, that's a weird one. It's supposed to be, sort of a trade city or whatever, but on the map it doesn't show it on the ocean, which is one of the weird things about some of these maps, is that they've got cities in places that don't make sense. There's not a lot outlined as like waterways and those sorts of things that are like necessary for cities to show up in the first place. Like, why the fuck would you put a city out in the middle of just a forest somewhere? But anyway, I digress. Then the other is the city of Corbeil, which is some kind of like hellish dystopia where the lord that the Lord of Corbeil is pretty much just a psychopath with an army, a small army of dwarves under his command. And he's like hunting people for sport and like torturing people for fun and shit like that. He's just kind of a total sack of shit. Definitely has designs on overthrowing the king, though the king is far stronger. And that brings me to one thing that I think is interesting about some of the things that this adventure does bother to detail, is that in every substantial settlement, it tells you how many hundreds or thousands of fighters the local authority has at their disposal, making me think that this was designed at least in part as a possible scenario for wargaming scale conflicts, and that totally tracks with everything that I know about early D&D, because chainmail was the combat system that was being used for OD&D at this time. Like, I think the Holmes Basic set had probably just come out a matter of months prior to this. So most people are using a lot of stuff out of chainmail still. So the idea of like having a crew of hundreds of dudes rolling across these islands, that's probably more what they were thinking than half a dozen adventurers bouncing from place to place. But I don't know.
Do you think that whenever people were playing it in its time, that's how it went, or that they just off the mark in their design?
I have no idea. I could see one group that's primarily wargame focused look at this as a series of interesting wargame terrains with some role-playing hooks here and there. Otherwise, I don't really see why it is useful for someone to know that the city of Arto has 8,000 people in it, and X number of them are fighters of this level and so many fighters of that level, and there's mounted archers over here and blah blah blah. Like, there's just a lot of information on a scale that is so much different than the individual like party members that it's just irrelevant. So maybe it's something in between, which would fit for the era, because there's certain hexes where you encounter 30 orcs or 20 bandits or whatever, something more manageable for a like modern sized party. But then the factions that you can kind of play against each other, it's clear that they want you to know how many warriors the Lord of Corbeil can summon against the King of Arto and so on, how many ships that Mortok has and that kind of thing. So I think that though there is no narrative outlined here, there's no chapters or anything like that. It's just descriptions of places and the people there and what their intentions are. It definitely looks like a whole bunch of dominoes kind of stacked up, waiting for a party to come over and just flick one in some direction or another. And then, you talk to the right people and you've got 4,000 dwarf soldiers marching across the island to the other city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is more something that comes up later, but I get the impression that there really is, that in addition to that, there's not really any guidance, much like the Palace of the Vampire Queen, where there is any sort of an idea of this being something that a particular level of character or group of characters could tackle. A lot of the stuff that we encountered was just completely randomized sizes of forces, some of them with which our characters could manage, and some of them so far beyond what our characters could possibly muster that it ended up being a situation where we had no other choice but to flee for safety and or hide in order to avoid getting curb stomped.
Yeah, and that overwhelming force that you guys have encountered a few different times has led to some interesting play, in my opinion, from my perspective behind the proverbial screen. Because though there have been plenty of times where you guys have thought you could fight whatever it was that was in front of you, there's been just as many or more times where you knew that you couldn't, or that it would cost too much even if you had a chance. And you guys have done a lot of diplomacy, a lot of intelligence gathering, and a lot of politicking to try to avoid direct assaults. A whole lot more than what I would expect some modern rewriting of this adventure to look like. Though it is all set up with a whole bunch of potential energy here, just waiting for a group to come along and disrupt all this fragile, tension and equilibrium that's kind of teetering on the edge here in this island chain. You guys could easily be crushed by any number of things on any one of these islands. So you guys have played this pretty damn smart, I have to say, though, it's been pretty damn rough on you.
I don't know if thank you for saying we've been playing it smart. I feel like most of what has been happening is we have been trying our damnedest to avoid setting forces against each other, because our past history has shown that any time we are instigators in some sort of a conflict between two forces greater than us, we get fucked.
Ain't that the truth?
So I feel like most of our attempts at diplomacy and smoothing over relations and all that has been learned behavior from what we've encountered so far, because we have gained treasure and lost that treasure at so many points so far in this campaign, including points which we will be talking about soon, that I feel like the entire party is very trepidatious about about picking a side in a particular conflict. And I feel like that is something that reflects the fact that we're kind of lower level, but by the rules that I've read, we're starting to get to the level where we really need to start thinking about building up our forces and actually having each character having a retinue of subordinates, so we can start to become power players in the world and actually start taking sides in conflicts like this.
Yeah, as far as level, keep in mind that in original D&D, you didn't get more hit dice after you hit somewhere around 10th level, and I'm kind of keeping to that scale. So you guys being a 4th, 5th, 6th level, one or two of you, You guys are definitely in kind of the middle tier, like just double it to think about it in, 5th edition terms. You guys are definitely strong enough to, be an influence on whatever area that you happen to be in, just as long as you play it smart. But when was the last time you saw a group run from much of anything in a 5th edition game? And, it's also clear that this is not a predetermined adventure that is just a stage upon which the party is supposed to waltz in and, do their cool flexes and then just kind of let the story occur around them. The fact that you guys have managed to not have a full-on TPK, just from random shit in the wilderness, is a testament to you guys playing it smart more often than not.
I mean, that's the thing. Maybe I have a different mindset, but since my character hit about 4th level, I've just considered him to be the top, kind of like in that top tier. It's my understanding of this version that kind of tops out pretty early and everything stays really deadly. So everything we've learned playing this system has been be super cautious, and I guess it's nice that it's paying off, but sometimes that can be a problem. Sometimes I get kind of a little bored with the overcautiousness. That's why my character gets a little wild.
Certainly can. I encourage you to do crazy shit sometimes if you feel like it might pay off big. Another thing that Clayton mentioned as far as the party's fortunes, just literally fortune that comes and goes. I see that all over these islands, is wild swings in how much money and loot the party has access to. You go somewhere and there's 10,000 gold on offer. I converted to a silver system, but whatever. 10,000 silver on offer for doing X, Y, and Z kind of thing. But then if you, have your 10,000 silver reward and wind up, showing up on the orc island, there's 700 orcs looking at you. You lost your 10,000 silver. It's easy come, easy go. This definitely feels like the the wild adventure tempo of sword and sorcery books and things. To me, this feels like that low fantasy Conan kind of romp a lot more than it does the high fantasy Tolkien sort of stuff.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I definitely feel like my character is living a Robert E. Howard series of adventures, and in a lot of ways, the wealth and respect and all the things that go with that I earn in one adventure don't necessarily carry over into the next adventure, and that's definitely something that's I hadn't experienced before playing this campaign, and it is a dramatic change of pace against what I've become accustomed to in D&D.
But let's not forget Conan eventually became king of Aquilonia, so we got to play that chapter out too, just to be fair.
Very true.
Well, I haven't built my tower yet to become the ultra powerful wizard in a tower yet.
Goals, buddy. We keep our goals.
Absolutely.
So what did you guys feel about the Isle of Baelor? We spent a good deal of time there, and most of it was in the city of Arto. You guys didn't really run across the hexes too much until you were escaping, but just as a spot on the map, what did you all think of this particular island?
Well, the capital city itself was a very needed reprieve. It was a very needed safe place where we could go and kind of get our bearings and get all the things that come with leveling up characters. I feel like a campaign needs somewhere that the player characters can go and feel safe at some points, because just being out in the wilderness and being at the mercy of the random encounter tables and all of the bad shit that happens to you when you're out in the wilds, that gets to where it grinds characters down, and having a reprieve was definitely needed by this point in the campaign.
Yeah, it was like coming to the promised land, as far as like what it meant to like finally get to a town and get to use some of that, spend some of that money, those of us who still had any. As far as the town itself, though, I didn't find it particularly, it just seemed like a big town that you drop a bunch of loot in and re-up and then go somewhere else. My character at least didn't make any significant NPC allies or enemies or do anything super significant. I did do a little bit of recon, but I think we could have gone a little deeper. But we, if I remember correctly, we kind of got ourselves on a mission path pretty quick. We didn't stay on our laurels too long.
Well, my character, who spent every moment of the downtime or the break doing downtime activities, I was really looking pie in the sky at what was going to come after the Palace of the Vampire Queen, where we were going to be established heroes and we were going to be able to do all these great things and establish ourselves here on this island. And it was quite a kick in the nuts when all that went sideways.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, doesn't really say what level the the Palace of the Vampire Queen is supposed to be run for. It's clearly much higher than you all were. And, since we were doing this chronologically, there really wasn't any other way to go about it. So I was kind of faced with the choice of either doing just a completely meaningless total party kill where you all just get devoured by vampires, or do something a little more interesting and intelligent on the part of the Vampire Queen and just charm you all into going in and assassinating the King of Arto, King of Baelor, all the islands for her. And so that's how that went. The group showed up with the lost princess from the city of Arto, looking very much like heroes. And then at what the king thought was the big celebration event of embracing his lost daughter and getting ready to congratulate these heroic adventurers. Then everybody pulls knives and stuff and just completely Caesars this motherfucker in his throne room. And then the group takes off.
I was, the entire time that scenario was playing out, I was reminded of Warcraft 3, where Prince Arthas returns to his father. His father thinks he's returning a hero, but it turns out he's returning as just the pawn of the Lich King.
Never played it.
Yeah, that was a sad day. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't surprised, but that was the same sentiment I had, is that when we went off and then came back and killed that guy, the main thing that me as a player was like, damn, we lost our city. God damn it.
And I got to say, two things. Jordan, thank you for not total party killing us in the Palace of the Vampire Queen and making our failure a very dynamic and interesting alteration in the course of the campaign, and also for making the flight from the castle an exciting escape. I felt the entire time we were playing through the session of us trying to get out of the city of Arto, I did feel like I was somebody who was hunted and on the run and really couldn't stop and take a break and rest because we had literally an army on our heels trying to catch us.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it, because that was the most difficult session for me to run of the entire campaign so far. I don't know.
Why's that?
Well, I don't know how many map transitions there were in that, but there was. I had it broken up into multiple battle maps, and so keeping the pace was very difficult. Keeping the party with that feeling of tension and they need to keep moving. That Clayton was talking about. That's really hard to do. This group tends to want to stop and really analyze things a lot. You guys are pretty cautious and stuff, and so that's directly counter to the fleeing for your lives mode of play. So just staying on top of that and fucking around with Roll20 to try to maintain the pace and still have everything be working out properly on the actual interface itself was very hard. juggling all those tokens. Like, it's just a lot to manage. Pulling up all these different creature stats and whatever. I just felt like I was going on all cylinders nonstop for the entire session. By the end, I was like exhausted.
I remember you getting all twisted up. I remember you would switch between maps. You're like, hold on, 5 more minutes.
Dude, Roll20 is so irritating. Honestly, would not recommend, but it's what I know and use at the moment, and need to spend some time on a better solution because it's not the one. If I could, real quick, I'd like to read to you guys what I had to work with for the city of Arto. This is pretty much the sum total description for that Hex 10 on the Arto map. So it says, 4,000 second level warriors guard the city of the king. All wear chainmail and shield of the city. They carry swords and throwing spears. The king is loved by all in the city for the peace he has brought to the land. A city entrance tax is required by all newcomers to the city, usually a percentage die roll times their level. All newcomers are required to meet the king for some friendly questioning concerning their purpose on the island. The king is most kind and only harsh with liars and enemies of his people. He is also very perceptive. That's it. That's all I had. That's all it gives you for the capital city of this entire realm.
Do you think it's fair to use it? Like, how hard of a critique should that be on this module, considering how early days it was?
That's completely a fair point. But I mean, I guess it's one or the other. They only had so many pages to go with. But as a direct kind of alternate history course that this could have taken, and might have if we Warriors hadn't gone out of business, is that you can look at the City State of the Invincible Overlord, published from Judges Guild, Bob Bledsaw in 1976, a year prior to this, and it is a comprehensive, detailed city that just it's elaborate. It goes into all kinds of different little subsystems and characters and encounters and all these different neighborhoods and blah blah blah. I think that the city of Arto could have benefited from something like City State of the Invincible Overlord, just a book specific to the city that the rest of the thing could kind of grow out of. The closest thing that anyone ever got to that, this is actually a Dungeon Master's Kit 3. There was a Dungeon Master's Kit 2 called the Dwarven Glory, and that was the old sort of Moria capital that had been completely ransacked. It was subterranean, and you guys went past the entrance of that, going to the Palace of the Vampire Queen, but nobody seemed interested in going in there, so I just completely skipped it. But they have a whole book for it, and it's like 7 different stretches of cave system that have a bunch of there's a police barracks, there's taverns, there's inns, there's whole sections of it that are still controlled by troops of Mortok that didn't make it out when the army pulled back, so they're doing guerrilla warfare stuff from the caverns in the shadows. But the problem with it is that it's a hot fucking mess. It's hard to find one that is complete, and it's full of typos, and a lot of it is real jokey and wordplay kind of stuff. It's not a very serious adventure, and so you wind up with something that's, to me, looked like hardly even runnable. So I made it available if you guys wanted to try that out, but I'm not gonna try to steer you guys towards it because I think it's a real mess. But I wish that Arto had something more expansive. I wish the Dwarven Glory was a city book that could have had those underground levels and stuff much closer to what City State of the Invincible Overlord was. And then I would think that the Misty Isles probably would have stuck out for a lot longer in the history of Dungeons and Dragons, being a really vibrant setting.
I'm sure that if our adventures on Baylor Island had gone different, if it hadn't ended, well, if our planned time on the island didn't end with the death of the king. I think we probably would have tried to go back and been more thorough in exploring things, but I'll be honest, after Castle Crake, it will be a while before I want to go down into a deep dungeon. So I'm welcoming the fact that we're going to be on some islands that are open terrain for a while, just as a change of pace. But I'm pretty sure by the time we get to the end of 9 islands, I may be ready to do something different again.
Yeah, that's one of the really interesting things to me about this set of adventures. The game is called Dungeons and Dragons. There's not a single dungeon outlined in this entire book, and yet it's arguably the earliest publication of a setting. That's pretty crazy to me. The overland travel for original D&D, it goes into it. There's rules for it, but it's definitely not the focus of anything. It was a pretty ambitious move on the part of we warriors to just go whole hog on this, overland hex crawl thing this early in the game. By the way, as side note on that whole thing about City State of the Invincible Overlord, if somebody really wanted to and wanted to spend some time kind of hot glue gunning the whole thing together, you could use the City State of the Invincible Overlord in place of Arto. You just have to do a lot of duct taping together, but the City State of the Invincible Overlord is a dwarven city, so there's stuff there if you are so inclined to put in that work. So
you mentioned that the overland travel, and overland travel is the majority of the rest of what we have encountered in this so far. We escaped seemingly by the skin of our teeth from the city of Arto. We were harried, I felt like, as we escaped patrols searching for us as we made our way to was it Moore? The city of Moore?
City of Moore, yep.
Yeah, we made it there and spent like a night there before heading off, trying to escape back to Poor Town. And we got a little bit about what was going on in that town, mostly just learning that it's they're very insular, and that they I don't remember what threat they were concerned about other than orcs.
That was mostly it. They'd heard a bunch of rumors from deep sea fishermen about seeing black-sailed orc ships moving in large numbers out to the west. So they were gearing up for a second invasion.
Okay, so we had a night to sleep after having to travel literally all night and all of the day in order to get to the city, and then we hopped on a ship and tried to make it back to Poor Town, but got caught in a storm and ended up getting shipwrecked on the Isle of Beauty. And I feel like that was another series of terrors that our characters encountered while on that island.
Yeah, the whole name being the Isle of Beauty and Death. And so this island is quarantined by all the other islands. It's known that it was once, not long ago, a few decades ago, I think, a dwarven mining island. There were 2 cities there that were pretty rich, from salt mines, I think, and gem mines, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyway, so a meteorite crashes into the island some time ago, and out from that spreads these alien plants called tripids, with a P in the adventure, but clearly a knockoff of triffids from the novel and the movies, the Day of the Triffids, if I'm remembering that right. Basically, they're large, flowering plants with vines that just kind of waddle around slowly and can blind people. That's the version in this. But they also take liberally from Invasion of the Body Snatchers and have that whole cloning piece to them as well. But the entire island's overrun with plants. And people occasionally go there trying to loot the cities of their wealth, but anybody that's found to be going there and trying to bring back something is facing a death sentence for maintaining the quarantine. It's a rough island.
Oh, we definitely broke the quarantine.
You sure did.
You forgot the cows?
I didn't get into the cows. I thought we'd get there as we discuss it, but I didn't want to talk over everybody.
We definitely had a few encounters before we got to the cows to kind of put us all on edge. So we shipwreck on the island. All of the food stores that we didn't have in some sort of waterproof container ended up getting destroyed. So most of our time on the island was spent hungry or starving and dehydrated. So that put us all on edge just from the get-go. We arrive on, I don't remember which corner of the island. I want to say it was like the southeast or southwest corner. Yeah. And we see parts of the island are burning, and the other parts of the island are just completely overgrown with plants. We find no wildlife to speak of. Not, if I remember correctly, not even like insects were there. So immediately we're all on edge and wondering what the hell's going on and what the hell are we going to eat. We do some exploring. We try to find somewhere, and we come across a pleasant little village
with some very nice people.
Before we come across the village, we come across the abandoned city, and that's where we encountered the quote people who were taking the druid to their village. And we find out that there's something wrong with these people because they're not susceptible to spells like Charm Person.
Which, could be an indicator, could not be. I mean, there's the way I'm doing Charm Person. That doesn't necessarily give you direct information. It could just be somebody that made their save or is too high for you to be able to affect, or whatever. I think the thing that gave it away is how they burned.
Well, how they spoke and spoke without true emotions was our first giveaway after they ended up not being affected by Charm Person, whether they saved or whether they were just not people. But those of us who were very observant noticed that they were basically talking as if they were wearing masks, like human face masks that didn't show emotions even though their mouths were moving. That was definitely creepy.
Yeah, like Mike Pence.
I remember getting my biggest disappointment was that I was content to live out this little shipwreck mini game until something better happened. And then the next thing you know, we inherit this freaking druid, and he just starts making food and water, and it's okay, back to the grind. I was all ready to make a little camp and maybe think about settling down on that old island.
You guys would have been in terrible shape had you not rescued that druid, and that's what was in that hex, and there was a couple of different ways that you could have gone. That's part of the entertainment of this for me, is I have no idea where you're going to go adventure to adventure, session to session, but that really helped you guys out, that you guys saved that druid. That druid could have died. You guys could have said, fuck you, I don't trust you, and just left him there, or just decided it wasn't your fight and moved on somewhere else. But having that there really took the pressure of the starvation off, because there's not much else here. You don't really want to eat the plants.
Yeah, they bought back. Clayton, remind me, because I think I was on the road whenever this was going on, so I was half in, half out. But why did we pick that fight with that village?
Well, because we felt like we watched what happened with the druid. We had heard, Steele's character Dunn knew that the island was quarantined and that there was a reason why. And as we were watching what they were doing with the druid, we learned that they were trying to propagate themselves. And by that point, we knew that they were not human. So that's why we tried to rescue the druid, is because he was instrumental to their plans to basically escape the island. So we knew that we couldn't allow that. So we tried to rescue him and failed the first time.
Yeah, that was one of the best examples in recent memory of you guys really playing the faction game well. After having a run-in with this village of Tripid duplicates, you guys were clearly outnumbered, and things were kind of a mess there. But you guys eventually left, and after a pretty horrible attempt to attack the village, you guys got the hell out of there and happened upon a group of shipwrecked orcs that included Mortok, the orc warlord, one of his sons. So you got this orc prince and 80 orcs that you guys did a pretty good job in tricking into attacking the village of the Tripid duplicates for you, and then sneaking in to do your deed while all hell was breaking loose around you.
Yeah, that was one of the few plans that we formulated and then enacted, and it went pretty well. I was very proud of the plan itself before we enacted it, and I was so happy to see that it went off mostly as we intended. That was a much needed win for us.
I mean, it really went off like a hitch, didn't it?
Yeah, you guys didn't have any real issues there at all. It pretty well went the way you wanted. I mean, 80 orcs, that's a lot of bodies to throw at a problem. And, the Tripids are essentially innumerable on the island. There's only going to be so many there at a time, and the duplicates themselves are not that robust of an adversary. It's really the Tripids pouring out of the woodwork from the tree line that make that a difficult place to assault. You guys bought yourselves enough time. I want to say I pretty much had to ad-lib most of that shit about like what was going on there, because there's not a lot in the descriptions of these places about what exactly is happening on this island. The best that I can describe this adventure is like a skeleton of just like idea prompts one after another, and they'll sometimes connect to nearby things or far off things or whatever, but there is precious little meat on the bone for the DM to really work with here. I mean, some would say it's a lot of space to be creative, but it's a lot of work any way you look at it. So I don't know. I think that whole section worked out pretty well.
Yeah, so we managed to rescue the druid, got a druid into our party who was able to cast either create food and water or some similar spell that was able to basically save the party from starvation for the duration that we were left on the island. And we start going around the perimeter of the island trying to find a way off of the island. We find somebody who is dying and gather the useful information that the Trifids die on contact with salt and water. So we got a new tactic, because before that, my character was burning through all of his fire stuff in order to be able to take these things down as quickly as possible to prevent our characters from getting overrun.
I remember I used oil to light a bunch of them on fire. I was very proud of that moment, because I don't think anybody else duplicated that. Maybe I was the only one with the oil, but that seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah, we were pretty strapped for resources by that point. We were glad to be able to get some vials and some salt water to put into them. That's how we handled most of the problems going forward. Like you said about the cows, we decided to cut across part of the island and see the first wildlife, or not really wildlife, but the first animal life on the island, and it's a herd of cows. And as we get closer to them, we get a little too close, and it reveals that they aren't actually real cows.
What was your guys' first thoughts when I told you see a small herd of cows?
This is a trap.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was a trap, but like my character was so hungry that it was worth the risk.
Same. Like, eyes wide open going into a trap. Like, well, it's got us by the balls.
There's a reason why I had my rod of produce flame in my hands as we approached.
There's so many different ways that this island can go. Like, you guys could have shipwrecked like right next to that hex, and that would have been the first thing that you encountered here. And, depending on which route you take, this all, reveals itself in different ways. And it's interesting to look at it in that context with complete lack of linearity to the story, yet it still is chunked up enough, I think, that it unfolds, I think, just about any way you would go through it in, an interesting, intense kind of way.
One thing that, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but from the moment we landed shipwrecked on that island, I think I just got a sense in the party that everybody was like, fuck this island. Like, God damn it. Of course we got shipwrecked. And like, there was, I think we discussed it out loud that it was like, we are not going to engage with this. Like, we're going to just get off this place. Like, we started just walking around the perimeter. I think that was, I think that that's a good way to go. I mean, as far as it was pretty clear by your initial descriptions that this was not going to be a place that was any fun for our characters. So we just doggedly pursued leaving. And after getting bumfucked by those friggin' cows and nearly killed, it takes that level of get me the hell off of here that we were relieved to see. What was it like? How many ships of orcs? Just one, right?
Yeah, one galley galley full of orcs looking for Mortok's son.
I was just happy to see a boat.
There's another spot that you guys didn't quite get to. If you had headed west, right when you had landed on the Salt Flats coast, there's a hex where you see a ship sort of on the horizon start to approach, and it gets just close enough that they can identify which island it is, and then you see the ship turn around and leave.
God, that would have pissed us all off so much.
Oh my god. What a mutiny.
Yeah, if my character had seen that happen, I would have stood on the shore and asked if it was within range of my fire beam.
I think that's such a funny detail that they put in there. It's excellent.
I would have we're living here now. F it. You guys can leave. I'm just, F this. I'll take my chances. Though, I wish we would have had a chance to explore more, because it seems like there were some pretty rich ruins that we didn't completely delve into.
That is part of the assumption about this adventure and a lot of these early adventures, is that it's just not even questioned that gold and glory is enough. That's all the motivation that any of the adventurers need. If that's not sufficient for the adventure that you have, then you made your character wrong and need to either get with the program or make something different. There's nowhere here that you plug in that, like, I'm looking for my lost father, or I'm trying to figure out, what happened to this and that legend or whatever. Like, none of that shit really exists. You're just, over and over again, it talks about, like, and people hear how much gold there is here. That's why people come here. There's shitloads of gold.
What do you think about that? Do you think that should be enough? Or do you think that, what do you guys think? I'm not sure how to feel about that.
I think that over the years, we've just been conditioned to expect this epic story. And, being an adventurer should be a profession that only the crazy do because it's so deadly. And that was the philosophy that was the game design philosophy back then. And I think that if we're playing these older modules, you kind of have to have a character who has that mindset.
Yeah, and you're starting out as a nobody, a talented nobody in a quasi medieval, sort of caste system kind of society every time. So what's your alternative? Are you going to be a serf? Or are you going to, scrape by as a poor peasant or something? You can't just walk in and say, "Oh yeah, I'm the Duke's son, so I'm set up for life." And no, I don't want to go risk my life for this or that. You're assumed to be gutter trash until you've, taken something from the world to to carve your place out. And then, once you come back with 10,000 gold pieces, maybe you do settle down. Maybe you retire with that. You become just some petty gentry or something, and that's good enough. I'm sure, minor noble houses got started that way all the time back in the day. But you gotta have some kind of motivation to risk your skin. This is not a game about peasant farmers.
Very true. I mean, and really, how many motivations can there be to go dive into a deadly dungeon? Can they all? And they can't all be to thwart the evil god or whatever, rescue the princess.
Yeah, exactly.
So eventually we meet up with, we are able to convince the orc ship that had way too many people on it for us to do anything about directly. And there wasn't a convenient village of enemies that we could send them off to throw themselves at in order to thin their herd. So we ended up striking a bargain with the orcs, because the orcs were there to try to find the son of Mortok. So because we had seen the son of Mortok, we bargained to take them to where we saw him in order to try to find him in exchange for transport off of the island. We basically cut through the middle of the island, and it felt to me like we saw some of the things that we would not have encountered because our plan was just to stick to the perimeter of the island. So we saw like the crater where the Triffids had come to the island from outer space. Another crash site very similar to the one that we encountered in County Crake. Was that something that was originally in it, or is it just a happenstance that the Night of the Walking Wet had this meteor crash site, and this particular island had this crash site?
This is one of those things that I'm picking up in this archaeological expedition here. Both of those things existed in those separate publications from completely different publishers. This was just a theme that was, just in the zeitgeist of the gaming community at this time. This idea of some weird alien thing crashing in what they thought was a meteorite and turned out to be some kind of ship, and then it takes over doing subtle shit. Like there's a bunch of different examples of that kind of theme throughout, pulpy science fiction, but it was definitely a big deal in this like mid-70s era of D&D. It pops up multiple times, and so it makes it really easy for me to connect all this together as, the major like meta plot kind of thing, just touching on each one of these instances of this theme.
That's hilarious. I thought for sure you were just connecting the dots for us.
Nope.
Well, Temple of the Frog also had an alien presence.
Exactly.
And I very recently rewatched the movie Call. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, and I was shocked to find out that had like the main enemies in that 1981 fantasy movie. The main enemy are aliens who come to this medieval fantasy world. So it's definitely something that was in the zeitgeist at the time for fantasy.
Yeah, it pops up again and again. I think that the modern idea that science fiction is one thing and fantasy is another is just that. It's a very recent modern idea. You go back to like, the pulpy shit from, be it Moorcock, be it Howard, the John Carter stuff, like, you've got this weird mishmash of what we think of as fantasy tropes, swordplay, and magic and things like that. But Cthulhu-y aliens show up in multiple Robert E. Howard Conan books. John Carter is on Mars in a sci-fi situation, but he's like a fucking like Civil War officer or something, and the lines are far blurrier, if they exist at all, back in the day, and I think it's much more interesting for it.
We should start an ODD publishing company and just call it Make D&D Weird Again.
Dude, the Elric books from Michael Moorcock are just chock full of weird sci-fi stuff. Lasers and multi-armed aliens and weird spacecraft and shit like that. Like it really plays around with that old Arthur C. Clarke bit about, sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic. Like, absolutely. Well, what is the difference for someone who knows about swords and battle axes?
It's probably Lord of the Rings movies, if I had to guess, and Harry Potter. That's the generation of kids starting to play D&D or buying what's being sold. Like, maybe that's just what... Do you guys just think that fantasy is kind of more or maybe the stereotype of what fantasy should be has just been very affected by those, like, visual mediums?
I think Western fantasy, yeah, but like you look at anime, and anime fantasy still has a lot of weird sci-fi elements in it.
And wasn't the Thundar the Barbarian cartoon like a post-apocalyptic setting?
Yeah.
That shit's all over the place. You look at He-Man and, it's the same kind of deal. It was only, I think probably somewhere in the late 80s that things start getting like very siloed between sci-fi and fantasy, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
I think you're probably right. Definitely He-Man and She-Ra, that's fantasy, and there are people running around in flying ship or flying like planes, literally planes, and shooting lasers at each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But let's see here. So you guys managed to save the prince, though you'd left him back in the village when you'd attacked with the orcs. You basically just scooted while the battle was still going on. So you hadn't seen him for a day or two at this point, and just assumed that he was still alive. So you led the rescue party across the center of the island. You saw the ship that the Tripids had crashed on. You found some treasure and never bothered to really mess with it, though it would have put a water elemental under your control. And you eventually found the prince with as much gold as you could possibly carry, and made it back to the city, and took off. You guys at this point were highly suspicious that the prince was in fact a Tripid duplicate, but really weren't in any position to throw accusations around. And this part was interesting to me. They had promised you a bunch of gold and that they would take you where you wanted to go. But when you guys got on that ship with the rescue party, nobody asked where you were going, and you all just kind of like went along for the ride, and like after 2 days of sailing wound up on the Isle of Invaders, or the Isle of Mortok, the closest thing to Mordor in the Misty Isles archipelago.
Well, the reason why is because we had been promised, and this is something that the adventure explicitly states and not something that you made up, I want to point out, is that the promise of wealth that comes with rescuing the sun is entirely a lie that the players can be told to get them to cooperate with the orcs.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, the module being the one to tell the DM to totally mess with the expectations of the players and what they are going to get for doing a good deed.
That's not the only time that happens in this book.
It's on brand, though. I mean, did anybody else expect that to go well? I mean, I certainly didn't. Like, oh yeah, we're going with the orcs. This is going to be fine.
Yeah. Few options for allies at this stage.
Yeah, we did what we had to survive.
Get off that damn island, though. I mean, that's the thing. You can't understate how shitty that island was.
Yeah, and you guys wound up right in the middle of Mortok's war camp. It's 4 hexes. It's a tiny island. There's really not a lot to it except for the base of operations and a few like patrols and ships coming in and out. So yeah, this is the hub of the whole thrust of villainy into this of invaders into this archipelago. You guys didn't really have a lot of options here either. That's one thing that I'm not a great fan of is that you're so overwhelmed so many times that a lot of times it puts players in positions where like it's not exactly a railroad, but like doing anything but obeying whatever the most powerful thing around is extremely risky. And you guys have been, unlucky in that you've been unable to build up a large force of allies to back you up on anything. So, it'd be one thing if you showed up with a fleet of dwarven battleships out in the harbor to parley with Mortok, but you didn't. You showed up, basically prisoners of his men. So there's a lot of situations that I think are set up for the players to fall into that are like that here. That if you don't have something like a parity of force up against these pretty villainous NPCs, you're pretty much having terms dictated to you, which is pretty realistic, I guess.
Oh, realism. It's not all it's cracked it to be.
I was just happy to get to and then off the island of the orcs with at least the gear that I had originally arrived with. I'm glad I didn't lose any additional gear, although we did lose all the money that we had on our person that we didn't find a way to secret away somewhere that the orcs couldn't find.
Yeah, and once again, you guys are being used as tools for political maneuverings. So for next time, there's 2 more islands that you guys are going to be interacting with directly. There's the Isle of Outcasts, which is a very strange island with a bunch of, I guess, lesser nobles, barons, these dwarf characters, each one like very idiosyncratic and morally questionable at least. And then the Isle of Despoilers, which is basically just a pirate haven. There's a couple of different strongholds there, 3 or 4, each one kind of at odds with the other. But yeah, some of these groups have allied with Mortok and the orcs, being traitors to the dwarven people. Some of these are working together or working with the Lord of Corbeil, and we haven't even gotten into the Isle of Wizards, where there's a lawful and chaotic set of wizard factions at war with each other that are influencing things, and some of these people are in contact with the Vampire Queen as well. So yeah, you've got lots of complex relationships and lots of double dealing, but you guys are being tasked with framing someone for framing the Lord of Corbeil with an assassination attempt on one of the leaders of the Isle of Despoilers, a pirate captain or admiral, I guess, to try to undermine that evil faction's solidarity. So we'll see how that goes.
I don't know about you, Clayton, but I feel like I'm really excited to explore that. I think that could be a really fun location for us.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to where this next adventure takes us. Like whenever Mortok was giving us the mission of what he wanted us to do, I am so thankful I wrote it down as he was explaining it, because I had to go back and reread it a couple of times just to put the threads together of who we were helping, who we were fucking over, and how it was going to be in the benefit of the orcs. So there's definitely a lot of intrigue and a lot of double dealings and backstabbings that we are getting thrust into, and that's the type of things that I love in adventures.
One thing I absolutely hate is dumb villains, and I think that there's a lot of places in this book where it sort of implies that a lot of these powerful characters, saying villains is too cut and dry. There's a lot of different perspectives here, but there's a lot of plotting and a lot of three-dimensional chess kind of stuff happening here from a bunch of different angles, and I appreciate that. I think too many adventures have some big bad that is just comically stupid and just waiting to fail. how in the fuck does somebody get that strong? How does somebody get that politically powerful that they've got hundreds of organized troops under their command, and all the economics around that and politics? Like, morons have a hard time getting to that tier of power and staying there for very long. I'm not saying that it can't happen. It certainly can, but I think that if you're that capable, if you're that high level, that speaks something to your mental faculties that I think is often overlooked.
Yeah, I will say that whenever we were, after we had killed the king and were trying to flee from the Isle of Baelor, I was like, me and my character were like, we need to get the hell out of this archipelago. There's nothing else here for us. And after this last session, I'm thinking, you know what? We can still salvage this if we wanted to. We could carve out a kingdom for ourselves here if we play our cards right, and if we want to devote the time and energy into doing that.
Yeah, that's the big question, the time and energy. A lot of it hinges on this next session, because, I mean, just like anybody else, if all you do is get a hard time, you want to go seek greener pastures. But, if we can actually right the ship a little bit on this next island, it'll make me want to explore more. Because I'll be honest with you, like, I personally wouldn't take a lot to convince me just to snatch the first boat and get the hell out of these islands.
And the way that the political intrigue is set up, this is large scale stuff that we are talking about. This is kingdom scale politicking we are just now getting our feet wet into. And we could take a couple of months to go handle the stuff that's going on back in the area of Blackmoor and come back, and the situation here might have changed some, but it wouldn't be so significantly different that we couldn't resume our machinations here if we wanted to.
That's a good point.
I hope that I've dropped enough hints that I've made it a point to not make the Misty Isles completely insulated kind of thing. That just to the west there's the land of black ice where these 10 orc tribes of Mortok have come from. Just to the south of that there's Tonnisburg, which is the first D&D dungeon. That's a separate thing. There's a Sul village there that has connections with what's going on out here. Blackmoor itself, multiple points in Blackmoor have connections with what's going on in the Misty Isles, and you guys are only just kind of feeling out what some of those are. But there's more information to be gleaned both in the islands and on the mainland about what exactly is going on where. And right in the middle of all of this is the unexplored and really uninvadable land of the Egg of Coot that just kind of sits like a 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the whole region, behaving completely unpredictably from time to time. So I don't know. I'm interested to see what you guys decide to do with this whole thing.
I mean, the way I see it, we could, like I said, carve out a kingdom here, and all we would need would be access to a boat, and we could get to other areas of the world that had promises of wealth and glory. If we wanted to do that in order to maintain our power, we could maintain somewhere here as a base of operations and still have a lot of interaction with all of the other stuff that has been hinted at and all of the other modules that are still yet for us to come into yet.
I don't know about that. The reason that I say that is because of the geography of the Flanace. Like the ICC is pretty isolated in the north because all you can do is go east, and then you have to go around the Thelonrian Peninsula, which is completely full of Vikings. It's 3 or 4 Viking nations that just constantly are raiding all along the coast. And then once you get around that, you wind up down into the east coast of the Great Kingdom, which is, as you guys have heard multiple times, is not the best place to be. these days. So Elliot's character would know that's a treacherous coastline to go around, and the idea that you'd be going back and forth very frequently, probably not. And then on the land, overland, directly between Blackmore and kind of the civilized nations, you've got the Empire of Ayuz, demon demigod on Earth. And you've got the Horn Society, which are, devil worshippers and some kind of quasi-fascist regime. And the Bandit Kingdoms, which are just, anarchy. Perrinland is really about the only route that you guys have to get to civilization without going through hundreds of miles of literal hell.
Yeah, I've made a silly map of the travels of Pete, given his starting point, and getting to it's a long haul to get to any place that we'd want to go. And I would imagine multiple sessions of similar shipwrecks and shenanigans to get anywhere of any note outside of these islands.
That being said, you could stay here if you wanted to. This would be a perfectly fine spot to have a character retire or just get postponed and put in the stall to pick up down the line if you feel like it. If someone felt like their character had gotten rich enough and you just want to be a baron of the city of Moore or whatever, that's totally fine by me, and you could drop in at a later date if you want to with updated tales to tell.
Well, that's a whole bunch of speculating on what can happen in the future. I think we've talked enough about what we've encountered so far in the Misty Isles. This is going to be definitely a very long episode.
Holy shit, yeah.
I'm ready to move on to geek things unless there's something else that somebody else wants to say real quick.
No, that's pretty much it. I guess overall, what's your guys' rating of what we've played through so far? We can, circle back for the overall thing when we're done with this, but just taking these couple islands into account, how would you score it?
I don't know if I can give a full account of what the first or the Isle of Priests and the Isle of Invaders. I don't feel like we really interacted with it that enough to give a rating for it. But I would definitely rate the Isle of Beauty as an adventure that if you're doing, if you want to focus on overland adventure, like overland exploration adventure, I would put this as almost a necessary adventure to do.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems, we haven't seen them all, but it seemed like a very engaging, entertaining, just kind of hex crawl. It was pretty good. I feel like going there with a purpose would have been more fun. I think the fact that we were shipwrecked on the way somewhere else didn't give us cause to really breathe in it because we were just wanting to leave. I would give. I would like to have a reason to go back, if that makes any sense.
As for the Isle of Baelor, if you're running it as part of, or if you also have the Palace of the Vampire Queen, I would, and you are planning on running those in tandem, I would definitely rate Baelor about what I said for the Palace of the Vampire Queen. Just because because of the way we played it and because of the way it's laid out, they're kind of, they're integral to each other for you to get the full experience of it. So I don't remember exactly what I rated the Palace of the Vampire Queen, but I rate the Isle of Baelor probably pretty similar.
Yeah. The thing about it is with the island hop, it's hard to make good relationships with NPCs. Again, if there's one thing, I think I typically as a player like to have some roots, but we long established that's really not even the nature of the game you're running. So within the paradigm of running through these old modules, this one definitely shows a progression into something more complex. Considering it was done in 1977, it was really well done for the time.
Yeah, I think if somebody were to run this just as its own campaign and wanted to use all the Wee Warriors stuff, the Isle of Baelor should be your starting point. and I think Arto or more should be your base of operations. And I would keep Palace of the Vampire Queen for being like the ultimate big bad fight. I'd save that whole princess getting kidnapped storyline, or turn it into a mystery or something like that, and save that till the end, because much like Curse of Strahd or something, you could hop around all these different islands, gathering up allies and items and other kinds of resources for one big final attack on the Palace of the Vampire Queen, and probably stand a pretty good chance of success if you played your cards right. So yeah, that'd be one way to do it.
So you're advising not to have the first adventure when you arrive in the Misty Isles be the one where you have the potential of having to fight 6 vampires at once.
There's way more than 6 vampires in the Palace of the Vampire Queen.
Yeah, but there are 6 standing outside the Vampire Queen's antechamber.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. No, yeah, I'm doing it chronologically just because I want to know what it was like to be players, seeing these things show up on bookstore shelves. But it's not the way that I would orchestrate it if I were running it as a campaign for its own sake.
All right, guys, what do you say we move on to geek things? All right, I'll go first. I don't remember if I've ever given this as a geek thing, but World of Antiquity YouTube channel has a lot of great resources. And recently, the host of that has actually gone to Egypt, and he's been uploading videos of him exploring some of the pyramids and other burial sites in Egypt. And the past few videos that have come out in June and July of 2023 actually shows the interior of these pyramids. So it's really cool if you want to get some good perspective and ideas on how to run a fantasy dungeon based on the real world. I think it's a great resource to see because you also get to see some of the real world traps that were designed to be used against Tomb Raiders. It's very cool to see how it was actually done in the real world.
See, I'll go. I just saw Oppenheimer on the, opening day or something. Man, if you get a chance, see that movie, especially if you get like a IMAX or something like that in your area. It's a long one. It's 3 hours, but goddamn, Cillian Murphy, it's just absolutely murdering it. And really everybody in it was great. There was so many cameos. I'm not going to spoil, but yeah, it was very, complicated and interesting kind of story about a complicated and interesting person. So, yeah, any raving that you hear about it is probably right.
Guys, this is a weird one. I'm going to pass on geek things. I've been writing, I'm in the depths of my summer. I'm taking it easy. I'm retreading a lot of old media, but I can't. I've been racking my brain. I can't think anything new or exciting or crazy I've really come across recently.
What was the last thing you watched?
Firefly. Yeah, there you go.
Fuck
Go
yeah.
back and rewatch Firefly, everybody. Sick. It's been a good revisit to a fun old home.
Hell yeah.
It's been several years since I've watched it. I've forgotten how good that show was.
Well, guys, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
See ya.
Let's do it.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.